sit down or not sit down, or to prune or not to prune, with or without coffee. So, I have this thing here. Yes, it functions. Pruning planting young trees and pruning young trees. So, a little bit difference. Before I started, please raise your hands. When you planted trees, who pruned them at that moment? Who pruned the trees at the moment that they planted? Hand up, please. Okay. Who don't? Especially don't prune them. Yeah, okay, without damage, okay. So the rest don't prune them. So if you go together with a discussion, then we're finished. It's okay, but that's too simple. Now, thank you. A lot of people still pruning trees when they plant it. It's all over in Europe, so it's not an exception at all. First back. Yeah, who am I? Henk van Scherpenzeel. Again, that's easy name. And from the Netherlands, of course, and the company is Boomtotaalzorg, when you can translate it in English, totally tree care or something like that. Tree specialist, and I do a lot of other things for the total tree care business. So that's it. Started in, that's a long time ago, 1972. And I'm still do something in the tree care business. Yeah, to prune or not to prune at the moment of planting, that's always the question, like I did just. Here you see two similar trees. The left one, the right one is pruned and the left one is unpruned. Both you have to plant it. Yeah, that's a big difference. The left one has a lot of leaves still, and the other one, they leave them by pruning. You have to push hard. So this is normally the way you have the tree come from the nursery, and you prune it before it gets into the ground. And yeah, a lot of people said, yeah, planting young trees from a nursery. The reason is why to prune, because most of the fine roots stay at the nursery. They cut it off, transported it, and comes. Also, you have to prune it because you have to restore the balance between the roots and the above ground, the mass of the ground mass, and to reduce also evaporation, because if you planted it, it will evaporate in spring and in the summer, and then it may be dried out. So pruning is a must. Okay, if it's so, it's so. Here you see it. This is on the left side is the tree, the same tree, unpruned, and on the right side it's pruned. It's quite different. A lot of crown mass you take away when you prune those trees like this. The other one is on the other end. That is a good cultivated young tree from an original nursery from here, not. When you plant the trees in, for example, Latvia, and you buy them in the south of Italy, this is quite different. Maybe they get a shock and they won't grow at all. But when you have a good cultivated young tree, you don't have to need to prune because it's very good cultivated. It's a wonderful tree, so there's nothing wrong with. Because also the max benefit of the max crown mass, the leaves, you need leaves of the tree because the factory tree needs the energy from the sun. By the sun collectors, we call it leaves or needles. And small-sized trees, Tom told about small-sized trees, you don't need to prune because it's all in balance. So, no need to prune. That's the other way. So there are always two streams, two options to do it or don't do it. This is a nice thing. It's one project. They planted pine trees and also robinia. The robinia they pruned, but the pine trees why don't they prune the pine trees? It's not familiar to do. But a lot of green on it. The needles, they evaporate as well. But it's not common to prune those pine trees. It's very common to prune broadleaf trees. It's just a remarkable thing. This is a project, they planted the trees half year before this picture. Big size trees, sorry Tom, big size trees, 40, 45, without any pruning at that moment. They were pruned well a year before at the nursery. And they were planted and they still, because the city, the community wants to have just a very green face at the street after planting. And you see it's functioned as well. They didn't prune it, still big trees, well cultivated, and of course a very good aftercare. That's very important. So mostly no need if the trees are very well cultivated, as I said, good quality trees, and fine branched root system, and been pruned before at the nursery. If that's well done, it's mostly no need to prune the trees, but it's up to you, of course. And we in the planting and pruning standard, we don't say don't do it or you have to do it. It's always a balance. It's always a question. We only said what the pros and the cons are if you do it or you don't do it. We had it already. So yeah. And pruning or not pruning, knowledge of species is one of the factors. Broadleaves or conifers, some fast-growing species, it's maybe better to prune them a bit, and how, that's another question. And slower-growing species, you maybe don't need to prune at all, or just in case of. Yeah. Well, it's a nice picture. It's for the most of you familiar by when they delivered young trees, you prune them and lay them down, and 1 hour later, or maybe the same day, you will plant it into the ground normally. And if you have to prune, and what do you have to prune? Of course, damaged branches. I heard it in the audience, and of course you have to prune the damaged branches. And maybe pruning or trimming the periphery of the crown. There are some people, also arborists, said, well, if you planted oak trees, quercus, you have to trim them just the outside of the crown a bit. That's wonderful. Okay. In some cases, pruning the periphery of the fast-growing species as well. For example, Tilia tomatosa, it could be maybe. Populus, and so there are some. You had it. Why does it goes back? Maybe I. No. And of course, there are always exceptions. There are a lot of exceptions, but exceptions don't say, well, this is an exception. So if you said too much, this situation is an exception, then it's not an exception anymore. Please leave an exception as an exception. In the Netherlands, we had a 3-year field research. That is at the IPC, that's a certification center and an education center. And we talked with Jarek over last year when we were in the Netherlands. They just dig out all the trees. And this is the first conclusions, but maybe it's a bit of take care after this kind of conclusions. They dig up the trees, and they saw when the trees were on the they pruned on the nursery. They gave some points at the thickness and the highness, the growing circumstances, and pruning at the nursery. The best they gave them, the trees. Let's show them the best results. So it's only 2 species, Quercus robur and Platanus hispanica. It's just a very carefully first conclusion. They they just spread it around as a first come out of it, and they will explain in October in the Netherlands for an audience of arborists. They will explain what's the big data behind it is. So I'm very excited what it is, but I thought it's maybe a nice thing to share it with you already. So, using good cultivated quality trees and providing the right aftercare is very important. Especially the aftercare is so very important. Buying trees, planting trees costs you money. The aftercare is maybe equal as costs, but it's so very important to do that right and proper. So then you that gives the trees for the first 3 till 5 years a wonderful start, and that's much more important than to prune or not to prune. For pruning trees at the moment when you planted them. Now further on, pruning young trees. This is in the standard, mostly at the structural pruning, and Dirk will just going on after my story. The focus is, I focused it on the young street or avenue trees with mostly temporary crown. You see here the picture. When you buy a tree, it's maybe 5-6 meters high, so all the crown mass will be, after several years, will be pruned because you need some space below the crown mass. Structure pruning, yeah. Well, the question, if you have to do it, well, what's the aim? Where are you doing it for? What's the aim? What is the function of the tree? That's maybe as well as important. And the location where the tree is there, where you have to fulfill his function, his or her function. And what is, at the end, the final image? Yeah, you could talk, what's the final image after 300 years? Maybe not the final image yet, but what is normally the final image when we look at the base of the crown, the branch-free clearance height for the traffic? That are the ingredients of structural pruning for young trees. And I learned to prune young trees in the beginning of the 70s. And there are the Netherlands, we have just 4 basic rules. It's quite simple. And if you follow these rules, based on those 4 rules, it's quite simple. Number 1, start early. Not 5 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock, no. But when the trees are young, yeah, start early within maximum 3 years after the planting. Then you start with structural pruning of young trees. And if you prune less at one moment. So maximum 20 to 25%. You see it in the middle. There are a lot of branches gone, and the right one there. You see only 2 branches they left, just one below. Why don't you lift it all right at this moment? Is that necessary? If not, don't do it. Just look at where are the biggest problems. And almost on the top, you see there is a big branch here, and they prune it there. Frequent interval, about every three years. Yeah. Sometimes more frequent by overdue or neglected maintenance trees. Every 3 years normally common is that every 3 years you come back and to prune something. Maybe 10%, maybe 20% of the crown mass, but that has to be enough. So if you prune that less with a high frequency, about 3 years, so the tree will grow fast as well. Don't get every time get a pruning shock, so it gets grown fast as well, and functions very good. And when you prune well, you can come back, because not a branch from a branch from a branch from a branch. No, just a complete branch or nothing. So that's maybe hard, because when you cut off a branch, you have to cut off the branch complete at the stem, and not halfway. And the fourth rule is recognize future problems. For example, weak V-forks. It's quite simple, but it is. And eliminate them. Eliminate them as soon as possible. And then that are the four common rules, or the four most important rules. Here you see a neglected tree, they be pruned. They started here on the left picture and the right picture. It's done already. This is not the way. No. Please don't do it like this way. Okay, we're finished now for maybe 5-6 years, but the tree will hardly grow anymore and have to restart again. So you don't get any benefit of it, so please don't do it like this. Some other important rules is the best period of structural pruning is just in the growing season. From, for example, half June till half September. That's the most optimum season. Could be maybe something earlier, maybe something later, but this is the most ideal moment. Remove complete branches, except if there are some. There's always an exception. And the first what you do is to branches with a wide diameter. That's to prevent large wounds, because if you prune now a branch from 6 centimeters in diameter, but you are scared you don't have to, maybe I don't have to do it. About 3 years, maybe it could be a diameter of 9 centimeters or more. So the wound will be more and more. So please, the thick branches at first. And look from the top down what you need. Where is the problem? Is there a problem? How high do we have to prune? Is it still 6 meters? Both sides, or one side 4 meters and the other side 6 meters. There's the road and there's no road. Or maybe you can leave it in a park, for example, after 2 meters high, you can leave it and let them go, except some problems, weak forks, etc. So look from the top down what to prune. Clearance the traffic zone, of course, and remove, by the young trees, remove the dead wood. Later on, if the tree is an adult tree and there's some dead wood, I think later on there comes some deadwood management, so that's another part of it. So to prune or not to prune young trees, prune correct and create sustainable trees. The cities need them more and more. And we know that now by the heat stress, so please take care of the trees, take care of the young trees and prune them well during the time they need it for the structural pruning. That's it. Thank you.